Hi, colleagues. Thank you for joining us. This is the podcast. We will get through this transformative leadership in disruptive times. It's really nice of you to take the time. John, it's great to see you.
Thanks, Scott. Great to see you. How's your week been?
It's been good, incredibly busy. It's starting to feel, I think, as you call it, normal X. We're back to some semblance of reality here, and it's yeah, incredibly busy. I think everybody's trying to find that new normal. John, today we're very lucky that we have Kylee Owen joining us, who is the local executive principal from the Callahan College campuses. And I know that you and Kylee have worked closely together for a few years, and I've had the privilege of also working with Kylee.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you here today, Kylee. We know in your role, you've had not only the pleasure and challenge of trying to get your college sort of in a future focus mindset, which is fantastic as you grow from here with a wonderfully diverse set of secondary campuses and affiliated primary schools. But you've also now had a global pandemic that no one planned on. Our theme today is really how you as a leader have been supporting leaders and how your team has been supporting the leadership in each of the school campuses that you run. So that's our main theme today, but welcome. We're glad you're here with us.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Scott. Fantastic to be joining you again. Look, anything that we can do to support this program and any leaders around the globe through the current circumstances, we're more than happy to do, and just share our own learnings and our own experience during this time.
Yeah, Kylee, could you start by talking a little bit about your experience as an educator?
Yeah, so I've been in education in New South Wales for over 25 years now, and have had an incredibly fortunate time to have some varied opportunities in terms of leadership through the years. So I've had experience in roles within schools as coordinator, head teacher, all of those sort of standard roles, but at the same time, I was also very fortunate to have some unique opportunities, including the highly accomplished teacher role that I was in for a number of years at Chatham High School in Taree on the mid-north coast. And that was probably the first role that I had, which was really working across school contexts. So that in itself was a more complex leadership role, but certainly an incredible learning opportunity for me. So I then went on to work in a college on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and was there for the establishment of that college, and was working in the role of deputy principal on a campus initially, however then went into a college deputy principal role. And then had some experience as relieving as the executive principal in that college as well. So again, working across a multi-campus site, so working with diversity of staff and working with, a broader learning community. And now at Callahan College, so my role as college principal here is to work with our three campuses. So we have two 7 to 10 campuses and a senior campus, year 11 and year 12. And each of those campuses has a campus principal and their own campus executive team, and of course their campus staff. So we, however, for the needs of our students and to ensure that very supported pathway from year 7 through to year 12, we work collaboratively as a college team as well. So my role is really to support those campus principals, their executive teams, and really galvanise the work of each of those teams across the college to ensure the best opportunities for our students.
Kylee, can you talk to us a little bit? I think the way you describe your role is really helpful for the listener to talk about how you work across the campuses. This is a really atypical year. I mean, it's been an incredibly challenging year, from the bushfires to the floods to the pandemic. It's a really interesting place for you to find yourself, because clearly you've had to tap into probably a depth or a well of the ability to support individuals' well-being, to provide people with counseling and guidance and motivation in some really difficult times. So Could you talk to us a little bit about the fact that, or about how you've been able to do that? How have you been able to keep your leaders going, focused, and motivated?
So probably the most critical component during that time was maintaining connection. So just ensuring that people felt as though they were connected and supported. So we very early on established some protocols around our regular conversations. Of course, they were, very much targeted around teaching and learning, but also that we built into that a check-in that was ensuring that all staff felt guided and supported through that process. And we also ensured that that connection came through some regular, also motivational kind of presentations as well, just to congratulate them on their work. They were working incredibly hard. We're being incredibly creative. And so trying to keep them inspired in that creative space, we also felt as though that was supporting their well-being also. So in terms of our leadership team and our principals team, we were working together almost a week. I'm very fortunate because I work across campuses that I get to see them all, several times a week. But in terms of actually coming together, the four of us as a principals leadership team, we do that on a fortnightly basis generally. But during that period, we were doing that almost on a daily basis, just to make sure that we were supporting each other. And you have to remember, and I have no doubt that some of your listeners who are principals would be very aware that it was an incredibly challenging time for principals in our particular context. Whilst we had very clear direction around things like work health and safety requirements and how we were expected to be operating a school based on those particular aspects, we didn't have a whole lot of direction in terms of teaching and learning and how we were actually going to go about delivering a quality educational experience to our students. So principals and school leaders were very much left to innovate in that space in a very short period of time, and really to make things work for everybody's own unique context. Now, that in itself is an incredible opportunity, and that's the way that we viewed it at Callaghan College. But I don't want to downplay the challenges of that for some context. I actually consider myself incredibly fortunate that I work with a principals team on a daily basis. That is quite a unique context. So generally a principal is working with their leadership team within their school site, and perhaps are connected to some colleagues on a less regular basis. So we're very, very lucky that we had each other to work through that time. But I think it's really important to acknowledge, yes, an enormous opportunity, but an enormous challenge at the same time. And with the complexity of the rapid change that was coming through that time as well, including through what would normally have been a holiday period, really wasn't for principals because it was such a dynamic space and the landscape was just shifting on a daily basis with different government announcements, and principals really had to be constantly watching that space and constantly readjusting what they had designed and built. So it's like I say, an incredible challenge, but we've actually tried to view it as an opportunity and move forward with it in that respect.
Kylee, we know that the challenge of flipping the school to from home learning was its own amazing teaching and learning challenge. In addition to that, what other big challenges were you speaking of when you talked about that word? And then how did you overcome them?
Yeah, look, I think in probably the biggest challenge in the initial instance was, we're very fortunate as a college. We had technology very heavily embedded, and a blended learning environment really was the norm at Callaghan College. So it did very much set us up for a fairly smooth transition in that sense. However, whilst we have technology heavily embedded at the college, it doesn't mean that every one of our students went home to access to a device of their own or access to Wi-Fi. So certainly that was probably the first challenge, was just to try and cater for the needs of students who didn't have access. We were somewhat supported in that through our Department of Education, in terms of senior students were supplied with devices. So students who were currently undertaking HSC studies in their final year of schooling were then supported by gaining a device and an internet dongle to overcome that equity issue. We did have some other equity issues. Students who do not have English as their first language at home, we had a group of students there who were not able to easily access the learning online. So we had an incredible team of staff who worked to just be constantly communicating with those students and their families and problem solving to make sure that access to the learning wasn't hindered as a result of that. The other thing probably that we really learned was, or actually a couple of things. So firstly, less is more. Our teachers were, in the initial instance, attempting to deliver work at the same probably pace and amount that they had been delivering in the classroom, and that just wasn't going to work given the complexity of the circumstances. So really big learnings in the initial instance around, how do we really target our learning? Let's really focus on what matters most, and that became a bit of a catch cry for us. And that is, the key concepts, the core skills, really, lessening the amount of content that was being delivered and really focusing in on some of those critical capabilities that we know are so important, including during that period of time. And also providing a really interesting challenge for us was, let's have some really consistent and clear approaches that support our students and our families to be able to navigate learning from home. So in the initial instance, it was, basically within the first week, as a college, we determined we needed a really clear set of expectations for staff, a really clear set of expectations for students, just in terms of things like how they were going to access their work, what were the expected channels of communication, for example, between parents and staff. Timing and all those sorts of things. So just really having some clear parameters to support students, given that they were just going into something that was, incredibly unfamiliar. But at the same time, we also had a major learning around the flexibility that we had to build in. So it was that balance between having a really clear and consistent approach, but also ensuring that there was flexibility which catered for the diversity of our students across Callaghan College as well. So, for example, we may have had, I think at the moment our survey results demonstrate that we had around 30% of our students who were actually sharing a device at home. So it wasn't therefore possible for every student to be online with their teacher at their designated timetable period time. So we needed to be much more flexible in our approach around student pace of learning and, submission of tasks and those sorts of things around supporting students who weren't necessarily able to, or we had some students who were working additional hours to help support their family during that challenging period as well. So again, catering for the flexibility of those students. So having that balance of clear and consistent, but at the same time, acknowledging the diversity and the differing needs of students.
Kylee, that's really helpful. So you talked about kind of the seamless, or it wasn't seamless, and I'm sure it wasn't easy, but the transition of going from regular in school to this online. And it sounds like a great deal of things changed and your priorities and a lot of focus areas shifted, as you articulated. Part of what we have heard from individuals and part of what we've been talking about is what's going to change, what's going to still remain? Like, where are the changes as you think about the Callahan colleges moving forward, the Callahan College moving forward, what do you hope that you don't leave from this experience, and what do you hope to leave behind from the previous?
Look, there are actually quite a few things that I hope to move forward with and be able to really continue to value into the future and our future practice. The creativity and innovation of staff and students. We really have celebrated that, and I'd like to ensure that we are maintaining a culture of that as we move forward. So supporting staff to continue to take risks in their practice and being creative in what they do. I would also say that moving forward, that concept of less is more. Now, we are much more focused on deeper learning and trying to, I guess, be mindful of the amount of content that we're delivering. At the moment, it's very timely given that we have a curriculum review underway and that we've just had our state government response to that. I think there's an incredible opportunity as a system for the system to really support us in that space in terms of decluttering that curriculum, allowing us to really target in on those key concepts, skills and capabilities rather than having to be delivering such a breadth of content for our students. So that's something that as a college we're incredibly excited about, and we're just really hoping that the system supports us as we move forward in that space. Look, the collaboration of staff. We're incredibly lucky. As I said, I'm very fortunate that I work with a team of principals every day. But because we are a college community and, almost 300 staff across the college, we really have our own professional learning community established. We're very fortunate in that respect, and we had staff within campuses, within their own faculties, but again, working across campuses. Our future learning team, for example, who are a group of staff who are representatives from each campus who come together on a fortnightly basis, who really drove the innovation around supporting the systems and structures that were going to guide staff in their teaching practice during that time. And those expectations that I spoke of, that was the team who really drove that and who are continuing to drive the blended learning and, the pedagogical approach that we want to move forward with. So that collaboration, we had that strong prior to COVID, but I would say it definitely has increased as a result of we were very dependent upon each other during that time. And the other thing that I would say I'd really love to see moving forward, one of the things that that John mentioned earlier was I think that mindset, and we as a leadership team across the college, we want to use this as an opportunity to really think about, well, what are the next steps from the learnings that we've taken away? And we've had a lot of student surveys, we've had student focus groups, we've got parent and staff survey information as well. So we've been doing lots of information gathering about what did and didn't work during that time. And our executive across the college, our college leadership team are looking at all of that information and looking at, okay, so what's going to work best for us as we move forward? What's going to best meet the needs of our students as we move forward? And that future-focused mindset is incredibly important. One of the things that I did do recently, sort of coming off that end of being at home and working at home for our staff period as we were transitioning back into our campus environments, was that I really wanted to maintain that positive mindset and get staff thinking about the future opportunities, because we're also in a period where we're starting to launch into our next 4-year strategic plan. So I really saw this as the chance to use our learnings as how we can better plan for the future. So I actually I utilised one of the podcasts that you guys had done. I actually utilised the Yong Zhao conversation that John had had, and I gave that as a professional learning to our executive team across the college. So that was part of their executive learning. And I asked them to reflect on that and to then come up with a question to ask back to John around what they considered, was the biggest learning out of that conversation, and what we might be able to use from that conversation about to move forward as a college into the future. And so each of the head teachers, deputy principals, all came up with a question. I then delivered those questions to John, and John and I sat and had a Q&A session, so very similar to this format. And then that Q&A was then presented to all staff across the college as part of their professional learning program as well. They then were able to reflect on their own learnings, and so it was essentially just a way of trying to maintain that positive and opportunistic mindset around our learnings, and that conversation about moving forward, what's next for us as a college. And so I think that that's actually really, really important and those conversations for us are continuing and have really beautifully kind of dovetailed into our strategic planning process. One of the things that I would say I would love to see more of, we're doing that at a college level. I would actually really love to see more support around that from a systems level. So COVID was a really interesting time where principals had a unique opportunity to do some creative things. And I think that, the majority of principals stepped up to that and did it beautifully for their own context. But I have to say it was also incredibly challenging for a lot of principals who had never really been in that space before in terms of innovation. And what I would really love to see that as a system, that we are supporting our aspiring leaders and our current principals to have a much deeper understanding around leading for innovation, because that doesn't just happen in a COVID space. That should be part of our role on a daily basis. And so, for us, we've got a fair idea of what we're going to take forward as a college, but again, that's something that I'd love to see in terms of system level support.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kylee, we really appreciate your being with us today. The insights you've gained through the process are going to help our listeners, and I think your reflection just shows how switched on you are to being a leader that continues to evolve no matter what the circumstances are. We always finish our podcast, Scott, with a sort of challenge to those who are listening, and there's no assessment task, no worries if you don't. But I think what I heard that came at the end, I'd like to pose as our challenge, if I might. And that is, many of our listeners are affiliated with or near a university partner. And for many cases, that's to support initial teacher education and practicum students. Others, there's research going on or other kinds of work going on across the disciplines. But I know one of the things that Kylie's team has done with us, Scott, is we propose that some students who might be a little behind coming out of this, they might be a little behind in their literacy or numeracy, they might be a little behind in their preparation for national or state examinations. I know in parts of the world those have been parked, but they'll be back. And for schools that are going to start again in the Northern Hemisphere, thinking with and partnering and using some of the flexibility to bring in some of the initial teacher ed students or maybe others to support students the way the school would like during school and around what teachers would say are the support systems. So I think the challenge is for schools to reach out to their partners, use some flexibility that might be there from accreditors or regulators, and see if you can't provide extra support. Because I think who we're really worried about are those students who did get a little behind and may not have those supports at home to catch up, or those students who are ahead and are feeling anxious because they think they're behind something. They're not really, they're always ahead of us. They're the next generation of leaders, but who with some extra encouragement would feel better about the journey. And Kylee, I think you've left us with that challenge, as you've done with your team, is let's reach out and see if we can't support those students who might be vulnerable academically, and with the good support of a tutor, maybe also feel they have a mentor, another person in their lives who will know them. So that's our big challenge.
I like that challenge, Sean. I think it's a wonderful idea. And Kylee, you've sparked a lot of good thoughts here. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your insights with our listeners. And I have a feeling we'll be hearing lots of positives about this one.
Yep, and thank you for all your leadership, Kylee, all you do every day to keep hope alive and to keep your team going in spite of all these things we didn't sign up for.
Look, thanks for the conversation, Scott and John, and thanks for the opportunity for me to just even reflect as well. We don't get to do that as often as we would like.
That's great. We look forward to seeing you in person soon. And to everybody out there, thanks for listening. This has been episode 24 of We Will Get Through This. Thanks for listening. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Everybody out there, hang in, be safe, keep your distance.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.